Hey everyone, welcome to the channel for another Escape from Tarkov video. In this one, I'm following up on my previous video covering budget builds for players from level 10 to 20 with some more expensive and fully kitted setups you can make at around level 15 to 20. These builds are using parts from level 2 traders and from Peacekeeper level 3, all of which can be unlocked by level 20 if you're making good progress on quests and focusing on getting your traders leveled up. While budget builds are kind of the go-to option in the early stages of the game, players who are on a roll and have built up a good economy by this point should have some cash to spare for some more fully kitted setups. While these builds are still somewhat limited by what you have access to at the level 2 traders, you can definitely make some effective setups at this level, even without access to the best in slot attachments. Before I get into the first build for this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to my newest Kill a Tier patrons, OSO Incognito and Jared Crawl. Thanks for the support on Patreon, guys, and to anyone else interested in supporting the channel, there's a link in the description. So with that intro out of the way, let's take a look at a fully kitted AK build that you can set up once you get Skier level 2. For the first build in this video, I'll be going over a build that uses the AKS-74N sold by Proper Level 2 as the base for a solid AK build with a magnified optic, backup sight, and fairly decent recoil stats. First off, I'll explain why I chose the AKS-74N, and it's a pretty simple explanation. It's cheaper and starts off with better recoil stats than the other AK-74 rifles at this level, and for a mid-tier build like this, it actually comes out with about 10% better recoil stats than the basic AK-74N. Starting from the muzzle, we've got the DTK-1 compensator from Skier level 2. This is the best option at this level, but as an alternative, you can also check the flea market for the PBS-4 suppressor. This one is a common drop in raid, so it'll be on the market even after the Find in Raid flea market update. Next up, the CAA RS-47 handguard from Peacekeeper level 2 is a great option on pretty much any mid-tier AK build. It's got decent recoil and ergonomics, plus rails for attachments, and is only about $100. For the grip on this one, I went with the RVG from Peacekeeper level 3, but if you don't have that unlocked, you can go with the Zenit RK1 from Skier level 2. It's a lot more expensive, but it also adds some more recoil control. On top of the handguard, I added the MPR 45 mount sold by Peacekeeper level 2 so I could get a backup reflex sight to go along with the 4x scope. I like going with the Delta Point for my backup sight because there's no ergonomics penalty, but you can use your preferred sight here. On this build, I also added an X400 flashlight, but that's completely optional. The main optic on this one is the PSO 4x scope, sold by Proper level 1 and 2 in a few different varieties. This one clamps directly onto any AK with a dovetail mount, and in the early to mid game, it's one of the cheapest and most used scopes in the game. For the stock on this build, first I added the AKS-74 PT lock adapter, and then the Zenit PT1 Classica stock, both sold by Skier level 2. This stock is actually one of the more cost-effective options for AKs, giving you a good balance of ergo and recoil. The PT3 stock has slightly better stats, but it's also double the price, and in my opinion, this one is great for a mid-range build. If you want it to be a cheapskate, you could just use the default stock with the rubber pad from Proper level 2, but I like the extra ergonomics from this one. Finally, the last two attachments on this build are the RK3 pistol grip and RP1 charging handle, both from Skier level 2. You can skip these if you don't care about ergonomics, but I think it's an important stat when you have magnified scopes. The overall stats on this one come out to around 64 recoil and 62 ergonomics, which is a pretty good balance for a mid-tier build at level 20. For the total cost on this one, you're looking at about 125,000 rubles if you buy everything at full price, but you can save on that by using rifles you loot in the raid to cut off about 35,000. For the next build in this video, I've got one that lets you take any Adar you can get your hands on and turn it into a full auto M4 with some decent stats and the ability to attach suppressors that you find out in the raid. I've talked about this type of Adar conversion in my barter trades video as well, but this one is using parts that you can purchase at level 20 once you have mechanic level 2 unlocked, because the best in slot parts won't be sold on the market for a good price after the flea market changes. To make this one full auto, you will need mechanic level 2, but you can set this up on a standard Adar at level 15 with Skier level 2. First, you need to get your hands on an Adar, either by killing scavs, buying one, or trading one rechargeable battery to Skier level 1. Once you have an Adar, head over to mechanic level 2 and buy the M4A1 lower receiver. It's a one slot item that will be red because it's non-functioning. Next, drag and drop the upper receiver, barrel, buffer tube, and charging handle off the Adar and onto this receiver, and you now have an M4A1. Starting from the muzzle, I have the KAC QD compensator, sold by Peacekeeper level 2. This doesn't give much real improvement to the default muzzle device, but it lets you add the KAC NT4 suppressor, which is a common drop and can be purchased off the flea market for a pretty good price. It's up to you whether you want to add one yourself or wait until you find one in a raid and attach it then. Next, I added the Wyndham Weaponry railed gas block from Mechanic level 2 to get the front sight out of the way. You can also use the MK12 gas block at Peacekeeper level 2 if you don't have Mechanic level 2. The railed gas block does let you attach backup iron sights though for the ergonomics boost. The handguard on this build is the MOE SL AR-15 handguard, sold by Skier level 2. This one specifically fits onto the 406mm Adar barrel and gets you some extra stats. You can also add M-lock rails to attach foregrips and tactical devices, and for this one I went with the RK1 foregrip from Skier level 2. You can use the RVG as well to save some cash, but the build can use that extra recoil control from the RK1. I've also got an X400 flashlight on here, but again, that's an optional piece. The stock on this build is the last really important part, and I went with the MFT BUS stock at Peacekeeper level 3. This one has best in slot recoil stats, and it isn't too expensive, but the ergonomics on it really sucks. Finally, I've got the Hogue rubber grip as the pistol grip on this one, sold by Peacekeeper level 3 for a pretty cheap price. For the optic on this one, I've just gone with an EOTech XPS3 off the flea market. You can substitute this for your preferred sight though. It's tough to get a backup sight onto this build at this level, so I tend to stick with just a reflex sight. For the overall stats on this one, the recoil comes out to 68 with the compensator and 62 with the suppressor. The ergonomics is about 63 with just the compensator and 57 with the suppressor attached. For the total cost on this one, you're looking at around $110,000 for the full setup if you can get the rifle from Skier for the trade, find one on a scab, or for cheap on the market. You'll need to add about 30,000 rubles to the build if you plan on buying the suppressor on the flea market though. For the third build in this video, we'll be taking a look at the earliest viable setup you can make for the VSS, which has become one of the most popular and heavily used PvP weapons in the game over the last few months. It's a very simple build because you can really only add a sight to it at this level, but it's also really all you need. The VSS already has incredibly low recoil, and you can buy cheap mags and surprisingly effective SP5 ammo from proper level 2 to put in this thing. While you could once set this thing up as a budget build, because it's popular now, even a simple setup like this is pretty expensive. To start off, you can acquire a VSS by trading 5 green filters to proper level 2. You can scrounge through weapon crates to get a drop, or you can buy one on the market for about 80 to 100,000 rubles. It's pretty expensive for just the base of the weapon, but you only need to add a sight, so it's not too bad altogether. To get a sight on here, you can just use one of the dovetail reflex sights like the Cobra or OKP7, but you can also use something like the B13V rail mount to get a reflex sight on there without taking a massive ergonomics penalty. Personally, I like the B13 at low levels for a dovetail mount because it has no ergonomics penalty and can mount almost any sight. For this build, I went with the Burris Fastfire sight and the mount from Peacekeeper level 1, but you can use your preferred reflex sight on this setup. That's pretty much it for the build though. As I mentioned earlier, it's really simple, and the only other things you need are the 20 round mags and the SP5 ammo at proper level 2. For the overall stats on this one, mine came out to 44 recoil and 53 ergonomics, which is really good for how much damage and firepower this thing has at close range. For the total cost, you're looking at around 100 to 130,000 rubles total if you purchase the VSS or purchase the filters for the trade. But if you use a VSS that you got from a weapon crate, this build is only about 20 to 30,000 rubles in parts. The last build I have for this video is kind of interesting, going for the long-barreled P90 SBR from Peacekeeper level 3. This barter trade gets you a P90 with the extended barrel as well as rails to add a sight and other attachments in exchange for just 2 military cables, which are pretty common to find all over reserve and interchange in the tech stores. The P90 might be outclassed by the MP7 in the endgame, but at around level 20, it's the best SMG you can set up and use with its top tier ammo, since the MP7 ammo and mags isn't unlocked until after level 30. The P90 on the other hand has 50 round magazines by default, and the 2 best ammo types for it, SS190 and L191, are both sold by Peacekeeper level 3 for a pretty good price. This makes the P90 one of the best close-range run-and-gun type weapons for the mid-game, since it packs 50-round mags full of ammo that can easily shred through class 3 and 4 armor. Like the VSS build, this one is extremely simple, and all I really added to the setup is a reflex sight and a flashlight. For the optic, I went with the Delta Point sight and the mount for it. I really like this one for close range fights, and it has no ergonomics penalty, which is always a bonus. Again, I like to add an X400 to most of my builds, but this is an optional piece if you don't want it. Finally, like I mentioned earlier, you can buy the P90 mags and the SS190 or L191 ammo from Peacekeeper level 3, and you're all set to mow down the whole server on factory. For the overall stats on this build, the longer barrel gets the recoil down to a very manageable 46 points, and the ergonomics is at 68. For the total cost on this one, if you purchase 2 military cables on the market, that's about 70,000 rubles total. Add the price of a sight and the flashlight, and this setup is about 90,000 rubles altogether. Well, that about covers it for these builds. I hope you enjoyed the video, and if you use these setups, hopefully they work out well and you can get some good raids in. I'm thinking this video will likely get an update in the 12.6 patch, assuming there's some tweaking to the traders and what they sell at each level. It's kind of awkward to be able to buy things like the SA58, for example, at level 18, but have no viable way to put any optics or attachments onto it until after level 30. But for the next video in this series, I'll likely be looking at weapons you can start building from level 20 to 30, using level 3 and up traders. This is where the best in slot parts start coming in, and the builds start to peak out for PvP fights. I'll be streaming more Escape from Tarkov on Twitch, and it'd be great to have you drop by the stream, so I'll link that down below. There's also links to my Twitter and Discord server, as well as my Patreon page if you want to pass on a little support for the channel. Thanks for checking out the video. As always, feel free to leave any comments, corrections, or suggestions down below, and until next time, stay safe in Tarkov City.